Welcome to the English with Kirsty podcast from www.englishwithkirsty.com. Here I'll be sharing with you tips, information and other learning resources so that you can improve your business English. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 93 of English with Kirsty, and I'd just like to let you know that there is no podcast next week, so the next one will be in 2 weeks. And the other thing I wanted to say was that if you listen to this podcast, you probably know that I'm looking for resources to go in the information booklet for episode 100. There's going to be like a sheet that comes out with it with useful resources on it. And part of that is other places on the internet where you can get good information. So we've talked about Facebook pages, Twitter accounts, and today I'd like to know if you know of any other good podcasts that help people who need English at work. Then please let me know what they are, and preferably with a link. And then, because that's what I'm looking for at the moment. So in the end, you're going to have some resources for Twitter, Facebook, podcasts, and a couple of others. But today I'm specifically looking for podcasts that will help people with their business English. So if you know of one, or if you run one, then please let me know, either using the comments form on the show notes page, which is at englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 93, or you can email me at kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com. And Kirsty is Kirsty, not Christy. You wouldn't believe how many times I get that. That's why I keep going on about it. You may think, oh, stop talking about that. But really, it's because people keep getting it wrong. So that's why, because I want to make sure that the emails that are sent to me actually arrive so I can answer them. Okay, so today we're talking about, this is more of a good communications episode, because before I was an English teacher, I was a communications manager, and that also meant that I saw some of the mistakes that native speakers make as well when they're trying to communicate a message or an idea. So today I'm talking about some of the things that people don't think about when they're writing texts or emails or documents, and to communicate with either their colleagues or customers or potential customers. Because I think sometimes, particularly if English isn't your main language, you spend a lot of time thinking about the grammar and the sentence structure and all these kind of things, but not always the tone of your message, and who is this message, who's going to be receiving it, who's going to be reading it, and is the tone and the writing style appropriate for them. So I'm looking at some of the mistakes that people make today and how you can avoid making them. So first of all, it's about formality. Not being too familiar. If you've just met somebody, you're not going to be their best friend, and sometimes I read things and they make me cringe a bit, because it just thinks, oh, that either sounds really false, or really superficial, or it just seems like somebody's trying to be too intimate, too friendly, and rather than making people relax, it can just kind of annoy them, because they're thinking, well, who are you? I have no idea who you are, and you're talking to me like you've known me for years. That's not cool. So although email communication has made things a lot less formal, we don't need to be talking to people like we were in the courts of the ancient kings and queens. We do need to be aware that, relationships are built on trust and getting to know people, and if you start off being like over familiar, then it can be a bit of a turn off for some people. And that's different in different countries. In other English speaking countries it may not be such a big deal, but English people still have that kind of reserve sometimes, and they want to get to know you a bit first. So on the other hand, you don't want to sound like you're addressing the Prime Minister or something, or the Queen, if you're just talking to a colleague. So it's really, look at what the other people are doing in your organisation. How do they speak to people? Are they on first name terms with people? How do they address people? That kind of thing, because that will help you, because you don't want to go too far the other way either and be too formal, because they'll think, well, what? Why are they doing that? And that's what you'll be remembered for, and not for what you're actually asking or doing. So those 2 points go together, really. Not being too informal, not being too formal. And sometimes you just have to observe for a while and work out what's okay. But then the more interactions you have with people, the more hopefully you'll get a feeling for what's appropriate in each situation. Number 3, don't use language that the audience won't understand. And I think this is really easy to do if you've been working in a company for a long time, or you're working in a very specific sector. I knew, like when I was working in the criminal justice system, there were words that I used every day with my colleagues and nobody would know what they meant. In fact, a lot of the time people who didn't even know what the agency that I worked for, what it was. So you can't assume that people know things even though you're very familiar with them. And I think people know that when they're talking to people outside of their sector, but also in other parts of the company too. You know, if you use something with your colleagues regularly, that maybe someone in a different department has never heard of this particular abbreviation, and they will either just ignore you because they think, well, if you can't be bothered to explain what you want me to do, then I'm not going to be bothered to do it. Or they might feel embarrassed that they don't understand. They may not have the time. They may plan to come back to you about it and forget or run out of time. So all these things can delay action if you don't make it clear to people what you want from them or what you're asking them. So one way to do that is not to use language or abbreviations that they wouldn't understand. Okay, if it's something that everybody in the company uses, maybe it's not so bad, but then again, it might be a new person, it might be their first day. So if you send them an email full of abbreviations and acronyms, then that's not going to be very helpful for them, and it may delay you getting what you want if you want some information or some help from them. So try to be aware of the language that you're using and make sure that you're not using things that people won't understand. Number 4, sometimes people want facts and figures. They don't just want to hear your brilliant idea. They want to know, well, have you costed it? How much time do you think this will take? How are you going to do this? You know, I'm probably someone who's a bit more like that. I don't just want to be excited, oh, this is going to be so great. I want to know why. You know, if you're selling something, don't bore me with how I'm going to feel. Tell me what is exactly in the product and that kind of thing. And I know this goes against marketing advice, because a lot of the marketing advice focuses on appeal to the emotions and then you'll make people want to buy. But, you know, there are people who don't think like that, and you know, there has to be a balance, because if all you do is talk about feelings and emotions and there's no substance to it, there's no additional information for people to read, then you can come across looking not very serious and as though you just have ideas but nothing to support them. So, you know, think about who you're speaking to and how much detail you need to go into, because the next point is sometimes people are bored by too much information. You know, sometimes I had a conversation with somebody the other day and they were trying to tell me the entire conversation that led to this decision that had been made. I only care about the decision. I don't need to know what this person said and what that person said and then what that person said. And I was bored kind of halfway through because all I wanted to know was the answer. So you can go to either extreme, and neither extreme is good. But you need to know how much information does the person that you're speaking to need to know or want to know. So, yeah, don't fail to give them enough information if they need a bit more, especially if they're going to make a decision about something like money or time or getting involved in something. But equally, if you're in a meeting and the thing that you're trying to discuss is only relevant to you and another person in that meeting, you're basically wasting everyone else's time if it's not relevant to them. So try and think about how much information people really need, and don't give too little or too much. And again, it's hard because every situation is different. People are different. People have different learning styles. I am interested in information if it's relevant to me, but I don't need to know every step of your process if all I need is the end result. And also, if you're sending an email, reading an email takes time out of somebody's day, and you can help them by not taking too much unnecessary time out of their day. You know, if they don't need all the information, or if they do, you can tell them where to find it, or, you know, you can get additional information, but don't make somebody read through a couple of pages when all you have for them is a short question. Number 6, if you're angry, go for a walk. It's kind of obvious, but, you know, at work, people can rub each other up the wrong way sometimes and annoy each other, or you might be having a bad day, or any number of things. But if somebody has really annoyed you, whether it's justified or not, go for a walk. Don't just fire back an email. because you could end up making the situation worse. Or sometimes, ask somebody else to have a look. It doesn't have to be somebody who's directly involved. It could be anyone, but just, does this look obnoxious or does it look okay? I've done that before because I'm quite direct at the best of times, and if somebody's really wound me up, then I do take a few steps away and think about, what I'm saying. Is it appropriate? Is it proportionate to the situation? Because sometimes emotions can affect us, and we need to think about whether the response is professional and appropriate. And number 7, think about the structure and length. This is kind of going back to not taking up too much of people's time, but don't kind of hop from one thought to another. Make it as easy as possible for people to know what you want from them or what you want to tell them, like the key information. What's the reason for contacting this person, and make it clear for them what that reason is as well. Number 8 is writing the best option. If you've got some really bad news for somebody, probably not. There are times when I generally prefer writing. The kind of work that I do, I speak to most people, communicate with most people via email, unless I'm having a scheduled meeting with them, and that's just the way that it works for me because I'm in a lot of meetings and I can't have my phone ringing all the time. But there are times when it's not okay just to send somebody an email. If you think that it's going to upset them or something like that, then sometimes it's better to have the conversation with the person, either on the telephone or face to face or on a video conference. And sometimes it would just take too long by email. If it's a discussion, it could go backwards and forwards via email 10 or 15 times, or you could just have a quick chat. So email isn't always the best place to have the discussion, even though it's generally my preferred one, but there are times when it's not. Number 9, what would happen if people read it? Is this something that would be a problem for you if it got into the public domain, or if it was taken out of context? It might be perfectly okay, but there are some things best not put in writing, because if the wrong person takes them out of context, it could cause a lot of trouble for you. So things should be secure, but things get leaked, things happen. So that's another reason to consider whether it's best to put it in writing. Number 10, how does a message sound when you read it aloud? And again, it might look okay to you, but does it sound nice? Does it sound like you're just barking orders at somebody or complaining all the time? Or how does it sound when you actually, if you read that aloud, is that the kind of message you would like to receive? I mean, sometimes you can't avoid sounding annoyed because somebody's been really annoying, but as long as it is objective and it doesn't always need to be nice, but it does need to be polite and professional. Does it sound okay? So if you're not sure, just read something out, and that's a really good way to find any typing errors as well, because sometimes you don't see them if you're just looking at it, but when you're actually reading it aloud, you notice something doesn't quite make sense, or there's an extra word, or there's a word missing. It was there in your brain when you typed it, but it might not be there on the actual text. So sometimes reading aloud is a really good way to make sure that your text is okay and appropriate for your audience. So those are the 10 tips. There's also a blog post about this, so if you'd prefer to read it or to look back on some of the points, you can do that. I'll link the blog post to the show notes page, which again is englishwithkirsty.com/podcast/episode 93. And don't forget, if you know any good podcasts for people who are learning business English, then let me know what they are. And I hope you have a good week. See you in 2 weeks, and have fun learning English. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the English with Kirsty podcast. If you have any questions or comments, my email address is kirsty@englishwithkirsty.com, or you can go to www.englishwithkirsty.com/podcast, where you'll find information about the individual episodes.